I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliosprand, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today I will be talking about all the books that I finished in the month of February. So yeah, today's video will be my February wrap-up, and in the month of February, last month, I finished reading 4 novels, 1 novella, and also 1 short story. I know that this is far from my, well, overly ambitious February TBR video, but I think this is kind of a great statistic considering that I actually went on a medical trip to accompany my parents to Malaysia for 10 days. And despite that, I still managed to finish 4 big novels, 1 novella, and also 1 short story, and I'm proud of it. And did my reading month last month top over January? Well, I will talk about it. But before that, speaking of statistic, today's video is sponsored by Brilliant. Whether it's on education, photography, video editing, languages, or any topic really, I always encourage anyone willing to learn or study something new. Brilliant.org is the best way to interactively learn math, science engineering, computer science, and data science and analysis. Brilliant has thousands of lessons from foundational and advanced mathematics to AI, data science, neural networks, and more, with new lessons added monthly. As a reader, I like data and statistics, especially related to my reading statistics. It goes without saying, the topic that interests me the most is data science and analysis. Constant learning is often essential for success. To try everything Brilliant has to offer, free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/PetrikLeo or click on the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thank you so much to brilliant.org for sponsoring today's video. So first, let's talk about the novella that I finished last month, and this is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Fredrik Backman. This is the first time I read anything by Fredrik Backman, and I know that he is often so popular for A Man Called Ove, but I haven't read that one. I have watched the Swedish movie adaptation of A Man Called Ove, and I really liked that movie. So I think after having such a great time, well, not really a great time because this is a surprisingly emotional reading experience, but because I really like this novella, I will certainly read A Man Called Ove as well. But And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer, this was sent to me by one of my patrons, and I will have to say thank you so much to Adi Raven for sending me this novella, because without him, I don't think I would have read this novella. And this is a beautiful, heartwarming, and also emotional novella. It is less than 80 pages long. Yeah, it is a short one. You can probably read this in about 1 hour, but believe me, the impact, even though this book is very small, the impact is immense. This novella centers around Alzheimer, and I personally consider Alzheimer and death equally scary. I mean, can you imagine missing the person who you know your entire life right in front of you? I think this is the kind of book or novella that will always remind you to not take anything we have in our life for granted. I know that we have so often mentioned something like this, but it is odd because we humans, we know the meaning and the importance of love, friendship, family, loyalty, and trust, but we are also the ones who often need constant reminder of how precious they are. And this is the kind of book. This is a beautifully written book that will always remind us the importance of these things. I did wish that this novella is a bit longer because, well, I think just a few more pages, it would have been more impactful for me. But yeah, it is still a great novella, and if you haven't read anything by Fredrik Backman yet, I highly recommend you to start from this one. It is short, beautifully written, and impactful. And before I talk about all the novels that I finished last month, let's talk a bit about this short story that I finished. This is The 6 Deaths of Sane by Alix Harrow. I think if you are active on Bookstagram or maybe on Book Talk, I think you will have seen this short story. This is a short story by Alix Harrow, and this is not the first time I read anything by Alix Harrow. I've read The 10,000 Doors of January and also The Once and Future Witches by the author, and I really enjoyed both of them. I think Alix Harrow is a great storyteller and her prose is absolutely beautiful, and it is once again reflected in this short story. As I said though, this is a very short story. It's only about 20 pages long, but I think it's really good. I don't want to say too much about this one because you can actually finish this in about 20 minutes. But let's just say that even though it is that short, it leaves a lot of food for thoughts. And if someone wants to make a discussion about this short story, They truly can. This short story left a lot of room for discussion. And as expected of Alix Harrow, it is well written, it is beautiful, and it is also emotional. So that's the novella and short story that I finished last month. Let's talk about the novels now. And the first two novels that I finished, and this one actually took me 18 days to finish both of them, and this is The Ember Blade by Krystle, and also the second book in the series, The Shadow Casket, the long-awaited Shadow Casket. So I have talked about The Ember Blade so many times on my channel. I think it is one of the most underrated epic fantasy book out there. It deserves to be mentioned and read by so many fantasy readers. So many. I think right now on Goodreads, it has almost 4,000 ratings, but in my personal opinion, it deserves so much more than that. It deserves so much more readership. This is the kind of fantasy book that blends the classic fantasy tropes and also the grey morality often found in modern fantasy or grimdark fantasy. But The Ember Blade or The Shadow Casket, both of them are not grimdark fantasy. No, they are not. They're just modern epic fantasy with characters that are so believable. I think the moral dilemma and the moral conflict they constantly face, all of them always felt so realistic. For The Ember Blade, this is a reread for me. I mean, I of course have to do a second read of The Ember Blade in preparation for The Shadow Casket, because The Shadow Casket, well, it's about almost 5 years since The Ember Blade was first released, and The Shadow Casket is finally out now. But before I talk about The Shadow Casket, let's talk briefly about The Ember Blade first. And yeah, you can actually check my full review of The Ember Blade on my Goodreads or on my blog. I know that I have talked about this book so many times now, but well, let's just say that on this second read, I think it is truly impressive how good Krystle at writing characterizations, even more so after I finished reading The Shadow Casket as well. Because even on the second read, I'm still amazed by just how engrossed I was with the characters and the characterizations. It has many classic fantasy tropes that I enjoyed reading, and it has many characters that I love. Whether they're protagonists or antagonists, I think they are all so well written. For the protagonists, we have Aaron, Kate, Grub. Grub, in my opinion, is one of the most well-written characters. Grub's voice is just so distinct, and every scene where he appears, whether in The Ember Blade or in The Shadow Casket, well, let's just say that he stole the spotlight. And then we also have Garrick, Hill, and so many more characters. Having read the Tales of the KDJ Quartet by Krystle, I think Krystle has really improved his characterizations that he learned from writing Tales of the KDJ in The Ember Blade. I also love the storytelling structure in The Ember Blade. I think this is the one thing that definitely made me love The Ember Blade even more, The Shadow Casket. But don't get me wrong, The Shadow Casket is still a great book. I will talk about it soon. But yeah, if I have to choose, I think I will have to say that I love The Ember Blade more. But well, this is not a surprise. The Ember Blade is one of the best first book of a series that I've read. There's just so much to love in The Ember Blade, and yeah, this is the kind of book where I can recommend it to so many epic fantasy readers. The characters are cherishable, the relationship between all the characters were so believable, the heist, yes, there is a heist, the heist and the action sequences of The Ember Blade, all of them were just magnificent. I absolutely love The Ember Blade, whether it's on my first read or on my second read, and I highly recommend it to, well, practically all epic fantasy readers. Plus, now the sequel is out. So yeah, it is time to talk about The Shadow Casket. For The Shadow Casket, I think almost all the strengths of The Ember Blade is still available in The Shadow Casket. The dynamic between the characters gets more complex, and I think this is a sequel with betrayals, deception, and manipulations as some of the key driving forces of the storytelling. And unlike The Ember Blade, there isn't a heist in The Shadow Casket, but yeah, there is still a quest for The Shadow Casket. In The Ember Blade, there was a quest to attain the Ember Blade, and of course in The Shadow Casket, there is a bit of a quest to attain the Shadow Casket. But you know, let's just say that this quest for the Shadow Casket is the one thing that actually made this sequel weaker than the Ember Blade, because the result of this quest did not feel as satisfying as reading the quest in the Ember Blade. I also did not enjoy reading the romance subplot that happened quite a lot in the Shadow Casket. But I think these were the only issues that I had with this sequel. Sure, there were a few sections in the first half of the Shadow Casket where the pacing kind of felt off to me, but ultimately, after reading through the entire novel, I think there was still a lot of payoff in the novel. More importantly, I think if you like Grub from the first book, you will love him even more in The Shadow Casket. The Shadow Casket is where I start to really think that he's one of the most well-written characters in fantasy. I really like reading his POV chapters, and as I said earlier, every scene with Grub, he completely stole the spotlight. And I also have to say, Chris Wooding did such a great job in writing the villains' POV chapters in the Shadow Casket. We have seen a few chapters of Krystle in the Ember Blade, and we get more POV chapters from him in the Shadow Casket. And even though he is from the opposite side of Eren, he's a very pragmatic character who's so focused on the meaning of justice, and he genuinely cares about his daughters. The love that he has for his daughters were so palpable, and if the situation is kind of reversed, let's say that Krystle was born and raised on the side of Osea, I think he could have become one of Eren's best friend or best companions. But yeah, overall, I really like the Shadow Casket, and now 2 books in the Darkwater Legacy is out. And well, I still have to wait for the 3rd and final book of the series. I hope this one won't take 5 years before it's out, but I will be patient. I will patiently wait for the 3rd and final book of the trilogy, and I hope the 3rd and final book of the trilogy will be the best book of the entire series. And until then, I will continue to remain as one of the champions for the Darkwater Legacy. And the 3rd novel that I finished last month is another reread, and this is a reread of one of my favorite series of all time. And yeah, this is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Red Rising is the first book in the entire Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. It was originally a trilogy. The first book is Red Rising, the second book is Golden Sun, and then the 3rd book is Morning Star. But it has been extended into a 7-book series. The 4th book is Iron Gold, the 5th book is Dark Age. Look at me talking about the entire series right now. And then the 6th book, the 6th and upcoming book is Lightbringer. But I'm doing a reread of the entire series right now in preparation for that upcoming release of the Lightbringer in, I think, July. Yeah, July 2023. The first time I read Red Rising, it was all the way back in the early year 2017. So yeah, it has been 6 years since the first time I read through Red Rising. Wow, it has been 6 years. That's crazy. But yeah, I really love this one. I know many people kinda compared Red Rising to the Hunger Games, and I can certainly see the resemblance with the Hunger Games, but I think it's better for me to say that Red Rising is the Hunger Games that will be more suitable for adult readers. Let's just say that Red Rising is a hybrid novel. It is the kind of novel that can be enjoyed by both young adult or adult readers. But that's only applicable for the first book. Starting from the Golden Sun, which is the sequel to this one, starting from there, I think we have really entered adult space opera and sci-fi territory. Not gonna lie, I'm really excited to do a second read of the Golden Sun, which I consider to be the best book in the entire Red Rising saga so far. But for now, let's just talk about Red Rising a bit. As always, I have done a full review for this book and also the other books, all the other books that I mentioned on today's video. But I want to talk a bit about my reread experience of Red Rising. Because it has been 6 years since the first time I read this one, obviously I forgot so many details of Red Rising, the first book. And I'm kind of shocked. I'm kind of shocked by how many pivotal characters we actually met in Red Rising. For whatever reasons, I thought that we would meet some of the other characters or villain in the Golden Sun. But no, we have met plenty of them starting from Red Rising. And all of Darrow's first encounter with these characters, let's just say that, well, they hit me emotionally. They left kind of a big impact on me, especially because now I knew all the epic journey or sacrifice they will take after what happened beyond Red Rising. It is truly incredible, and I think that is the best part of this reread experience, and I'm quite curious to find out how my reread experience of all the other books in the series will go. Also, on the plus side, I'm doing this reread with my co-bloggers who also did the first time read together with me. The first time we read through them together in the year 2017. So yeah, it's kind of like we're going back to this series together. From my first read, I considered this book to be the second weakest book of the entire series. And well, I already love it this much. If you haven't started reading Red Rising Saga yet, well, I highly recommend it. It is an incredible sci-fi space opera series. Well, of course, I say it's incredible. It is my favorite sci-fi series of all time. And finally, the last novel that I finished last month, and is also the only self-published fantasy book that I finished last month, it is Legacy of the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. This is the first book in the Tainted Dominion series, and I'm quite surprised by this one. I end up enjoying this more than I thought I would. Now, don't get me wrong, I was so looking forward to reading this one. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Legacy of the Brightwash, but also it has been marketed as grimdark and also romance fantasy. And I don't usually click with romance fantasy, but surprisingly, the slow burn romance in this one is better than I expected. It's better than I thought it would be. It did took me about 25% before I felt fully engrossed with Legacy of the Brightwash. It's not until we actually arrive at the fancy dinner scene. I think those who have read this book will know which scene I'm talking about. It's not until we reach that scene I felt fully engrossed with Legacy of the Brightwash. It is a hugely character-driven grimdark fantasy, and well, I will leave a full review on this channel. Most likely next week, because I just finished reading it now before I made this video, and I still have to gather my thoughts regarding Legacy of the Brightwash. But well, it's really quite safe to say that this one might become my favorite book of the month. I really highly enjoyed reading Legacy of the Brightwash, and I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised why so many people love this sub-published fantasy novel. It is incredible, and the characters are just so well realized. And I certainly look forward to reading the second book in the series Legacy of Brick and Bone, which is, I think, slated to be released in April. But yeah, I think talking about Legacy of the Brightwash require a more detailed review, and I will leave a full review on this channel and also on my Goodreads next week. So that's actually all the books that I finished last month, but there is another book that I'm in the middle of reading. Well, I thought I would succeed in finishing this book within February, but apparently not. I'm talking about A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan, the 7th book in the Wheel of Time series. I've started reading this, well, I don't know for how long now, but let's just say that it's taking longer than I thought it would be. At the time of recording this video, I'm about 50% through A Crown of Swords. And you know, the first quarter of this book, I actually finished reading through them in 2 days. And when I was reading the first quarter of A Crown of Swords, I really thought, you know what, maybe the slog is actually a lie, at least for A Crown of Swords. But after I finished reading the first quarter, and then I arrived at Egwene's chapters, well, I can certainly feel the slog. So much bickering, the long chapters often doesn't have any substantial information. And yeah, it is right now a bit of a struggle. Hopefully things will get better in the second half of A Crown of Swords. So yeah, that's it. That's all the books that I finished last month. As far as Book of the Month goes, I think it will have to go to no reread included. I think it will have to go to Legacy of the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. I really enjoyed that one. And as I said, I will leave a full review of the book on my channel next week. So yeah, that's it from me today. Do let me know what you think of my February wrap-up, and let me know how many books you finished last month. Which one was your favorite? And as always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.